Hello and welcome to DSR's Daily. I'm David Rothkopf and I'm joined, as I always am joined, well, most of the time I'm joined, some of the time I'm joined by Riley Fesser. How are you doing, Riley?
Pretty good. It's a gloomy day, but it was a good weekend.
Well, I'm glad. Why was it a good weekend? Is there something you want to share with people that...
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't go to this game, but my Reds blew out the Orioles yesterday, 24-2. So that was fun to watch. And then I saw Sinners, which was really, really good. So it was a good day.
What do you say, man? I mean, you're the host of not one, but I think two movie podcasts. What
do I say about Sinners?
You ready for Sinners? Are you hearing good buzz about Sinners?
Yeah, I mean, I want to see it because I want to be part of the cultural conversation. I feel like it's such a big movie right now. Everyone's talking about it, but I don't like scary movies. So I was asking Riley before we started recording if he thought it was going to be too scary, if I should, because I don't want to be the one person who walks out of Sinners because it's too scary. That would be humiliating.
Look, if you can handle this podcast every day, you can handle scary.
I mean, fair enough. Could I walk out of this podcast if it gets too scary?
Well, we'll see about that. But I mean, the reality is, read the news every day. There's no movie as scary as the news. Anyway, let us start with the news and the somber news from over the weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Pope Francis, who led the Catholic Church for over a decade as a reform-minded leader, has died at the age of 88, the Vatican announced on Easter Monday. His passing came just a day after he made a final public appearance in St. Peter's Square, weeks after a long hospitalization for severe respiratory and kidney issues. Remembered for his humility and efforts to reach marginalized communities, Francis leaves behind a reformed church and a college of cardinals largely shaped by his appointments, who will soon gather to elect his successor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably the last person in the world to go to for commentary on organized religion or, its significance. But this guy seemed like a good guy most of the time. He was a little slow on the uptake on dealing with some of the scandals within the church, but he did ultimately deal with them. Anybody who emphasizes the disenfranchised in the way that he did is doing literally, by anybody's definition, God's work here. And, the reality is that if somebody has influence to some degree over 1 billion people on this planet, it matters. And you saw that literally the day before he died when, he did not jump to visit with J.D. Vance. He, first of all, sent his one of his aides to go and talk to J.D. Vance and talk a little bit about the importance of showing humanity and compassion if he's going to profess or believe in religion, and the Pope limited the amount of time that he spent with the vice president as well. It just goes to show, J.D. Vance was seeking political validation. The Pope was doing his job and sending a message, which he always did. He reached out to migrants. He reached out to the poor. We live in a very divided world, regardless of the job title somebody holds. Anybody who seeks to bridge those divisions, anybody who seeks to emphasize compassion over personal gain, that's somebody who's making the world a better place. So he will be missed. Riley?
The U.S. Supreme Court is reviewing whether the U.S. Preventive Service Task Force, which mandates no-cost preventative health services under the Affordable Care Act, is unconstitutional. The case was brought by plaintiffs opposing some services on religious grounds, particularly HIV prevention medication, and claim the task force structure violates the Constitution's Appointments Clause. If the court upholds lower court rulings, key ACA provisions ensuring free preventative care for over 150 million Americans could be invalidated. Public health experts warn this could undermine disease prevention, increase healthcare costs, and disproportionately affect low-income individuals.
Yeah, of course it could. And, how many times did the Trump administration go after the ACA the first time around and failed in the Congress every time? So now they're going after it in the courts. One of the angles on these arguments that I find most offensive is when people say, well, I have these religious beliefs, and so it should block everybody else from doing what they need to do or what they believe in. Your religious beliefs in a country with religious freedoms are yours to guide your own life. But your religious beliefs, by extension, are not supposed to guide anybody else's life or the behavior of the government. And clearly, the people who are most dependent on the ACA are the poor. And this is consistent with an overall theme within the Republican Party, which is to say, and this is kind of a good story in contradistinction or juxtaposition with the story about the Pope. Because the message of the Republican Party right now is no compassion, survival of the fittest, greed above all other things. Where do we cut in our government? We cut healthcare services for the poor. We cut food services for the poor. We cut educational services for the poor. Why are we cutting? In order to enable us to reduce the tax burden on the rich. So, that is the opposite of what Pope Francis was teaching. It's the opposite of what every religion teaches. It's the opposite of what we should believe if we're just decent, good, compassionate people. Will the court do the wrong thing here? Probably. And I think we need to brace ourselves for this. The next several years are going to be very rough in the United States on programs that would never be even debated in other developed countries because they are so much in the vein of the natural thing that a government provides in a civilized society for people who cannot provide for themselves or who need a little bit of help, who need a helping hand. Again, it's the day after Easter. It's part of the Passover period. A lot of people in a lot of religions are, going to their places of worship and discussing, values. It would be good to see values guide leaders and not be tossed aside in American politics as they currently are. Minna?
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is under scrutiny for sharing sensitive military plans about strikes on the Houthis in Yemen via private signal chat on his personal phone, which included his wife, brother, and lawyer, raising serious concerns about security breaches. The revelation comes amid growing internal chaos at the Pentagon, marked by mass firings, resignations, and a leak investigation that has deepened mistrust among senior staff and alarmed former allies. Critics, including Hegseth's former press secretary, says the disarray has distracted from critical national security priorities and reflects a quote-unquote full-blown meltdown in Pentagon leadership.
Yeah, no kidding. Who could have expected this? Who could have expected putting a guy in charge of an organization that is one of the biggest and most complex in the world with no management experience would result in this? Who could have predicted that putting a guy in charge of an organization with complex management and policy issues who has never worked in a management role in the defense sector could have resulted in this? Who could have predicted that putting an extremist who felt that the most important things for the department to do to get ready was to take Jackie Robinson books off the shelf would lead to this. But I would argue that this is part of something bigger. We're in a national security crisis right now. I'm a historian of the NSC. It has never had less influence than it has right now because this president doesn't care to listen. And Mike Waltz, the guy he picked, lost a lot of his credibility on Signalgate 1.0. We're now in 2.0, thanks to Hegseth. So the NSC is dysfunctional. Over the weekend, big stories in the New York Times about cuts coming to the State Department. The White House, and particularly Secretary Rubio, pushed back on those. But the reality, of course, is those cuts are coming. They are lying. They are planning to cut perhaps as many as half the staff of the State Department, including, as in one document that was covered here, which may or may not have been seen by Rubio, but is certainly the intention of some in the administration, cutting a lot of embassies in places like sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere around the world, cutting programs that give us influence and power, like we did with USAID, but also going after all programs that deal with climate, democracy, women's rights, international organizations. How do we know that's going to happen? Even if they disavow the CO, well, look at their record. Look at what they've done on climate. Look at what they've done on women's issues. Look at what they've done on diversity. Look at what they've done on international organizations. Those things, they're cutting back in all of those areas already. So what does this all mean? I mean, we started with Hegseth. What it means is the Defense Department is in disarray. The State Department is getting weaker and weaker. We are losing tools on the international stage. We're undermining our international alliances. We're empowering our enemies and rivals, as we've talked about here often, like the Russians. And we have an incompetent group of people surrounding a president who doesn't listen to anybody. That puts us in a very precarious state as a country. It's the kind of thing the Republicans used to pride themselves on being extremely good at. I'm not sure they ever were that good at it, but they used to pride themselves on bringing competent people into these jobs and strengthening these institutions. The opposite is happening here. I've been in Washington continuously now for the past 32 years, and I have to say, I've never seen the situation worse, more chaotic, more worrisome than it is right now with regard to U.S. national security.
Four House Democrats traveled to El Salvador to investigate the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man wrongly deported by the Trump administration despite a Supreme Court order requiring his return. Abrego Garcia, who had legal protection and American citizen family members, remains imprisoned in El Salvador, with administration officials claiming they lack the power to bring him back. The case has sparked intense concern among Democrats over violations of due process and defiance of judicial authority, which many see as a constitutional crisis. While Republicans have largely supported the deportation, some acknowledge it was a mistake, further highlighting the partisan divide over immigration.
Look, let's clarify something about the Abrego Garcia case. It's obviously a miscarriage of justice, whether you believe he is a member of a gang or not. If he doesn't get due process, and if he gets thrown in a foreign prison or a foreign concentration camp that the U.S. is paying to keep him in, essentially forever with no hope of getting out, well, that's totalitarian police state kind of stuff. But Abrego Garcia is not the only person whose rights have been violated here. Every single person who was sent out of the country by the government, whether they were in a gang or they were not in a gang, had their rights violated. There was no due process. The orders of the courts were ignored. All of them have had their rights violated. Every single person who is getting rounded up for dubious reasons and denied access to lawyers, denied formal complaints from the government that actually enumerate things that they've done wrong. They are also being deprived of their rights. And the fact that all of these people, this class of hundreds or thousands of people, are being deprived of their rights is a sign that this government is contemptuous of the idea of fundamental rights and freedoms. And we know that because they tell us so. When Donald Trump says, "I'd like to send Americans to this concentration camp," that tells us so. When Stephen Miller and others say that the people who we're getting rid of don't deserve to have rights, that tells us so. When White House advisor Sebastian Gorka tells us that anybody who argues that they have rights are supporting terrorists, which is a violation of the law, and they should be prosecuted, we should be prosecuted for calling out for honoring the Constitution, that also tells you something here. So Abrego Garcia's case is egregious. He deserves to be back home. He deserves due process. But the broader problem is that this is serial, systematic, premeditated violation of fundamental rights and demonstrated contempt for the rule of law in the United States from the people who are supposedly in charge of defending the Constitution and those rights. And that's why the debate over whether we're in a constitutional crisis or not is irrelevant. What's relevant is that rights are being trashed and attacked, and it looks like that's going to continue for a long, long time to come. Minna.
China has warned it will firmly oppose any international trade deals made at its expense, vowing to take, quote, resolute and reciprocal countermeasures if the U.S. pressures other countries to curb trade with China in exchange for tariff exemptions. The statement from China's Commerce Ministry follows reports that the Trump administration is preparing to leverage tariff relief to isolate China economically. Beijing criticized the U.S. for abusing tariffs under the guise of equivalence and reaffirmed its determination to protect its economic interests and cooperate with other nations facing similar pressures.
Yeah, well, first of all, if you were China, what would you do? You do exactly this. Secondly, I don't think the U.S. strategy is going to work. Why? Because the United States is just one big trading partner in the world, and as big as we may be, and whatever erratic, crazy schemes this government may be coming up with, any other government needs to maximize the number of sources of economic opportunity it's got in the world, and China is clearly one of the places everybody most wants to be engaged with. So China has a lot of leverage there with regard to all of this. Watch this week the IMF World Bank meetings that are taking place in Washington. These are the spring meetings where finance ministers from around the world get together. And I happened to be at a meeting with a bunch of folks from that group yesterday. And to say that they're worried about the positions of the United States, the lack of strategy, the lack of principle, the lack of dependability, the threat that it represents to the international system, would be an understatement. One very senior person said, "I look forward to being able to talk to the United States." But then that was quickly qualified with a recognition that the United States is right now impulse-driven and not dependable, and frankly is the biggest threat to the international system, not just of trade, not just of finance, not just economic, but also international organizations that are designed to keep the peace and to defend us and to protect us from climate catastrophe and so forth. The United States, the role the United States is playing is not one that any of us have ever seen before. And the way the world is reacting to it would not be heartening in the slightest bit to the average American. I wish they understood it. I wish they cared about it, because it really, really matters. Anyway, we'll be tracking all of this stuff this week as we go forward. It's only Monday. It seems like we're already a lot further into the week than that with all of these stories. But we'll be here each and every day at the DSR Daily. The Daily Blast from the New Republic that we also produce here is here each and every day. Our regular podcasts, including Deep State Radio, Words Matter, Scylla Consciousness, Energy and Climate podcasts that we do, all of these are going to have special and exciting episodes this week. So go to them. And if you like any of them, go to the dsrnetwork.com, sign up, become a member, encourage your friends to be members. In times like these, honest expert perspectives are more important than ever before, and they're rare. We're proud that for the past 10 years we've been providing them here, and we look forward to doing that in the future with your support. So thank you very much. Thank you, Minna. Thank you, Riley. Have a good week, everybody. Bye-bye.